welcome to day 2 of leg 3 of the Ocean Race Europe, where pretty much everything has happened as we forecasted. The wind has shut down for the teams, but the challenges have remained, and they've mainly been the heat. These were some of the images that were sent to us from on board the VO65s. This is Amber Sail 2, who, just like everybody, not just the 65s, but also the Imoca 60s, have been sweltering in nearly 30 degrees of heat with very little shade on board both the Imoca 60s and the VO65s. It didn't really matter whether you were on watch or off watch. You were being called, you were being asked to come out on deck occasionally, back into the heat after just very little rest from trying to concentrate all night. Everybody was struggling with the heat. Some more than others, and some, luckily, were able to rely on previous experiences. Arnus, on board Amber Sail 2, felt a little bit more comfortable than most.
It's a love and hate relationship. I guess for me it's a bit easier than for the rest of the crew, who lives more in the north, and they're not used to this. There is a little bit of shade in the boat. You can see in the front, Linkus is now having a nap in a little shade behind the mast at Code Zero, and the guys are scrolling on Instagram or something, just chilling, enjoying the shade, because all day we didn't have much shade, and you're gonna see a lot of lobsters tomorrow. It's a lobster fest here on Amber Sail.
It won't just be Amber Sail 2. Sailing Poland, like everybody out on the water, was having difficulties, and for Bauer Becking, coming up from a probably well-deserved rest after getting his team into first place, he was probably hoping for a bit more breeze than he found.
He's on the other board or what?
He's on the other deck.
Let's just take over and see how it goes. Don't you think so?
Calm leadership from Bauer Becking on board Sailing Poland, and this was the boat that they were trying to keep their eye on. It was Merpuri Foundation Racing and Axonobel behind them. Skipper Chris Nicholson on board Axonobel Ocean Racing going up the rig to try and have a little look around and see whether there was any breeze. No one really made any bold moves. No one had the option to, and no one had the nerves to split from the small patch of breeze that they found next to the coast. Not least Merpuri Foundation Racing, currently sitting in second place.
I mean, they are moving, they are not doing 20 knots.
Thank you. We weren't sure here.
Can you open the hatch up front? Rob would like some ventilation. It's Rob, please.
Quick.
A lot of what we saw over this period of the race was big changes of wind direction. When the wind is light at only 2, 3, maybe 4 knots, it doesn't take much to throw that wind off course, and suddenly you've got to completely change the way that the boat is set up. One of the things that happened for the fleet as they were compacted together, the VO65s, was the wind would keep swinging round, meaning one minute you were going upwind, the next minute you were going downwind. Downwind meant you needed to make some pretty big decisions, and for Chris Nicholson on board Axonobel, it was all about when the wind was enough that they could actually fly their kite.
It feels like there's nice pressure there now, enough to fly a kite for sure.
We'll get it up. And
you can tee it up.
It's gonna be okay, Tristan. We're gonna plug in the A4.
Get off the base.
Just plug in this A4.
A good lesson for anybody going offshore there. If you want to get a good rest, choose the spot on board the boat where you're going to go to sleep very carefully. Liz Wardley sleeping on top of the A4, chances are that was going to be the sail that they were going to pick next. It's not like you can pick anywhere on the boat to sleep. You've got to put your weight in the right place. But if you sleep on top of the storage of coffee that everybody wants, or the next meal, or the next sail, you're unfortunately going to be the first person to be woken up. And when the breeze did arrive, I mean, it was starting to look pretty good. It wasn't all about the A4 for some of the teams. For Amber Sail 2, they were back on the masthead code 0, but crucially making progress. So let's take a look at how the fleet found themselves at the end of play yesterday. In the middle was the VO65s, or at least most of them, skirting along the southern coast, with Sail Poland in first, Murpuri Foundation in second, Axonabel Ocean Racing in third, then the Austrian Ocean Race Project, followed by Amber Sail 2, and then Viva Mexico very close behind. And there were a lot of manoeuvres that these 5 VO65s needed to do. We talked before about the fact that they were having to hoist their downwind sails, then their upwind sails, but as the breeze came in, it became so important to stick in those patches of wind. That meant jibing a little bit later on, but at first it meant tacking. And it's worth just having a look at how much effort it is in order to tack these boats. First things that required for a lot of the crew is moving the stack over. And this is the view of Rosalind Kuiper up on the bow at the moment of Axonabel, but normal position being the main trimmer, as well as being the person who's sending us all this information as the media crew member. Once we've had a chance to move the stack over to what will be the new side, or at least split the stack so that part of it is over on the new side, it then means getting back into position so that we can tack the boat over while the breeze is still good. For the main trimmer, that means getting back onto the rear grinding pedestal. And that's Will Harris joining her there. And now all these pedestals linked together. It's about furling up that masthead code 0. The big sail at front has to be wrapped up round itself to avoid the mast, the forestays, before deploying it on the new side. So this is everybody now grinding it together, and you can also see, I think it's Rory Hunter there, darting from one side to the other to basically let off the running backstays. He's pulling one on one side, and then just when he's got that one through, darts back over to the other side before easing it off. All the pedestals now, they're onto the new winch that's going to be grinding on the sheet for the masthead code 0, with Liz Wardley forward, pulling the sheets clear, getting onto the new one and trimming it into the right place. Meanwhile, at the back, Will Harris and Rosalind Kuiper now are on the hydraulic system, putting the pressure into the Cunningham to try and pop that top batten. And at the top of the mast here, having those battens inverted the wrong way for any length of time is brutal on your boat speed and the overall efficiency of the rig. So they're trying to put the pressure onto the Cunningham to pull the sail down at the luff, open the leach and flick that batten. And it's a lot of work to do it. They try and pump it on. Then, when that doesn't work, they dump the pressure in the Cunningham system to see whether it was too much in the first place. One batten goes, then another batten goes, but still the top section of the sail isn't working. So, flick the hydraulic switch back over, back onto the pumps, and then try and grind that pressure back on. All the time also think about, well, where's your traveller, where's your main sheet as well. So a lot of coordination, and even in the light winds, a lot of physical effort just to get that main from one side to the other and looking right. And you can see where the ability to pull off all those manoeuvres starts to pay dividends on the water. The leaders, Sailing Poland as the VO65s exited the Balearic Islands, were putting in an incredible amount of manoeuvres. At this point, the wind had changed, so they were jibes, along with Murpuri Foundation Racing Team that were following them in second. But look at how much of the split remained with Offshore Team Germany and Childhood One, the other VO65, way to the north. And then to the south, here we found the other 4 IMOCA 60s, with 11th Hour Racing Team pushing pretty hard in the south, and Justine Matreau on board, keeping her fingers crossed that they were going to find the breeze before their rivals.
For sure, these last days, and especially today, I think it's been quite tropical on board, so really warm. On deck it's kind of okay, but inside the boat it's really warm, so hard to get any sleep. It's nice when we can open the front hatch when the conditions are light. But yeah, so we feel like the summer is here.
For your information, your cognitive system. Currently, you're doing 80 on starboard right now, in building speed.
A couple of nautical terms to pick apart there. First of all, Charlie Enright talking to Simon Fisher on the helm about your cogging 60. So that's course over the ground. The boat might be pointing in one direction, but it might be going sideways. I mean, it might be going backwards. So the important thing is where are we actually moving relative to the ground? Take the tide out, take any drift out. What are we doing? And they're moving 60 degrees on the compass, course over ground. The next thing he was talking about, which is quite illuminating really, is he talked about you're doing 80 on starboard and building speed. I think that's a reference to 80 degrees to the wind. So you're on a reach. That shows you just how light the wind is. If you have to look at the instrument rather than just your sails or your general sailing feel to tell whether you're going upwind or on a reach or downwind, if that's what you need to do, then that tells you that the wind is so light that only the best computer systems can really read it and understand exactly what's going on. So some pretty tough sailing here for 11th Hour Racing Team, and some tough sailing for the other IMOCAs as well. Linked Out hasn't been at their best performance this leg, or at least hasn't broke free yet. Cross your fingers if you're a fan. But there might be one reason why. We received this update just after yesterday's show.
We had a few issues at the end of the night. One of the sails fell down in the water because we had an issue with a hook at the top of the mast. So that was an interesting moment where we all had to put back the sail on the boat and repair the sail because there was a small hole because the sail fell on the foil, and with the strength of the water it was a bit torn apart, but now it's okay, it's fixed, and we could sail it back, send it back up. But now we've changed sails, so it's not even this one. We are doing our best. We are not bad in our group of 4 IMOCA 60s, and yeah, everything is okay on board, but looking forward to have some wind.
A quick sail repair on Linked Out, and Coram, in that same group of IMOCA 60s to the south, wasn't faring too much better in their hunt for favourable conditions. While there were no reports of any damage and everyone was able to get some well-deserved rest, or at least get a break from the sun, that what breeze they did have wasn't really taking them and the rest of the IMOCA 60s in the right direction. Now, there's a couple of little things that, even though this bit of footage almost looked like we needed to just throw it away, there was a few things that were interesting to notice in the background. So I want to walk you through a couple of those little things. First of all, this is the view from the nav station. So it's worth pointing out that they're looking at the tracker as well. This is the Ocean Race website, and I can't quite tell what the other tabs are that are open on their web browser. But what it shows you is that they have internet access on board these boats. They can't get any outside assistance. They can't speak to somebody on the shore and have them tell them what to do, but they can go digging around for information. Where else are you going to go but the tracker on our website to see what the fleet are doing? You can see the instrument panel on the left-hand side. Nothing too interesting about it, apart from the fact that at this moment they found themselves in 15 knots of wind. That's not too bad, even though the voltage on their batteries does seem a bit low. They're going to want to charge that in a minute. But what was more interesting as to what was pinned on the walls. So down here on the bottom right-hand side, this looked to us like the watch schedule. There's 4 people on board this boat, and it looked like the columns on this table were divided from 1 to 12, meaning 12 hours. So potentially on this boat here, you're having a good 6 hours off watch, and that seems like a lot. It could be that you're 6 hours on watch and then 3 hours standby and 3 hours off. And that seems a bit more brutal. But either way, 4 people on board the IMOCA 60, it's very different to how they were sailed in the solo configuration, of course. Next one to point out is a few little things just going on in the background. You've got to look beyond the mess slightly on board these boats. There's no real reason to tidy this up beyond just making it work for you and keep the tangles relatively clear. I'm sure there's method in the madness. On the right hand side, there's a list of configurations. Weren't fully able to zoom in enough, but basically a list of where their settings should be for different sails, for their downwind sail and for their code 0. And then hiding behind the winch at the back, just underneath the port hatch, is a sail crossover chart. And this is gold dust on board these boats, something that they will have spent lots of time making, and it will tell them what sail they need to be on for what angle and what wind speed. No more guessing, they've already done that in training. Now they have it written down. Big question for them though was what was happening with the other Imoca 60 that was all the way north with the other VO65. Childhood 1 and Offshore Team Germany were all the way to the north and making pretty good progress. Offshore Team Germany electing to stay pretty hard north and, well, not always finding themselves in the best breeze possible.
Our routings were all northerly of the Balears. So when we started into the race, for us it was crystal clear that we will go north, hit the coastline again. As some of the others did as well, but then somehow we find a lane where we were lifted brutally onto the fleet, and within, I would say, 5 hours the separation was so big, so it was never our plan to split, but there was a chance which opened and we took it.
Robert Stanjek on board Offshore Team Germany, who along with his crew are making all the right moves at the moment, and again, light winds, we didn't have too much to do today, so we started noticing all the things in the background. And there's a lot going on here. So first of all, that looks like their watch system. And while we can't quite decipher it, it'd be interesting to see how differently they are dividing the time and the labour that it takes to sail this boat compared to the other teams. Also, on the right-hand side, you get a little bit of a peek at the instruments. So you can always go back and have a little bit of a pause and see exactly how they're sailing the boat. Interesting to note that we do know that at least one of these boats is on the Ocean Race website following our shows potentially. So they might get a little chance to have a look at these instruments and see what wind this boat did have. And up from the north with Childhood 1 and Offshore Team Germany, things were managing to stay pretty good. They weren't having the huge changes of wind that the rest of the fleet were having. The north was always going to be a bit more of a sure option, and as these two came down behind Sailing Poland, they were looking pretty confident to close in on that front pack, and certainly for Offshore Team Germany, a big lead over their nearest rivals. But with everybody so spread out, the only thing that really matters is what is going to happen with the wind. When there's so little of it out on the course, it is such a difference to be sailing in 3 knots versus 5 knots. And trying to find that breeze on an area that's so difficult to forecast is pretty tricky. So this gives you some idea as to the challenges ahead for these sailors. It's the wind direction partly, but also just how different it can be 50 miles up the track. For the leaders, they'll be sailing on as the time ticks down and still staying slightly south of that white rum line. And as they do, they'll stay in the best of the breeze. Behind them will be forming a bit of a wind hole, and this will keep the Imoca 60s from catching up. A big crunch moment here for the Imoca 60s to see what they can do. If that forecast doesn't quite pan out the way that we've laid it out there, which is very, very likely, it might be that the Imoca 60s can start closing down that distance on their biggest rival to the north, Offshore Team Germany. And if they can, we might see some place changes in the Imoca 60. For the VO65, that's much more likely. Sailing Poland are looking strong in first place, but the breeze that they've got right now, very different to the breeze that is 50 miles behind them that the other VO65s are going to be experiencing. We're into the closing stages of this leg as we head towards the Italian coastline, but nothing is certain yet. Keep your eyes glued to the tracker. That's going to be your best source of information about all the position changes as they evolve. And before we see you all tomorrow, we're going to leave you with everything we simply didn't have room for today.